Every animal who we farm is eventually killed in a slaughterhouse. Does that constitute cruelty in your eyes or not?
That definitely constitutes cruelty. I'm going vegan.
Hi Ideen, my name's Ed. It's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much for sitting down with me. I have a banner and it says, "Why aren't you vegan yet?" So, why aren't you vegan yet?
I just enjoy trying a variety of food, and I feel like being vegan would take away a large variety and a lot of options for me. Yeah.
Does the enjoyment of a food justify what happens to produce the food? Definitely
not. I don't think the practices in America are definitely like out of pocket 100%. I'm not pro any of that. If the animals were taken care of.
Can you describe what that would be? Obviously, it's a not a particularly unique thing to be against factory farming. I think most people are, because it is objectively really horrible. But what about, like, you said good practices, or like maybe taken care of well? What would that look like?
I would say, like, if animals were raised with care. I mean, like, the factory farming is obviously terrible. So I would say if, like, animals are raised with care, they have the right space to live and everything. They live out their lives, and then, they get consumed one day. But that's just how the world works, right? Not the world, but like the circle of life.
What does the circle of life mean? Because I guess the circle of life is really that, we're born and we die. That's the circle, isn't it?
Yeah.
But the circle of life and the fact that death is inevitable doesn't necessarily, I don't believe anyway, provide justification for us to take life arbitrarily or without a necessity. Mm-hmm. Did you agree with that?
The necessity is to feed human beings, right?
But does it have to be done with animal products? For you and I, because obviously the question is why aren't
That's true. I feel like it's like a opinion thing. I feel like for some people, originally, human beings were hunter-gatherers, right? They survived off of consuming other animals. So in that sense, I feel like it is justified if we were to have good practices and go about it the proper way.
So obviously with hunter-gatherers, that was a huge part of our history.
Yeah.
And that was important because eating the animals at that time allowed us to survive and allowed us to continue until we are where we are today. But it was a necessity back then. And this is the thing about wild animals. Other animals do hunt and eat other animals, but they do so because they have to. A lion eats a gazelle because, well, they have to, but also they don't have the moral agency that we have. They don't have the ability to be able to rationalize the impact of their choices. We shouldn't hold ourselves to the same standard as wild animals. Is that something you would agree with or disagree with?
I would agree with that. But at the same time, human beings are more intelligent for a reason, right? And this is how it works. More intelligent species consume other lower intelligent species. That works within animals, it works within us. We're just another form of animals.
Sure. But is that not equal might makes right? Because we can, therefore we are allowed to. Do you think that's true?
I feel like that's getting into a little bit of political thinking, right?
Well, I guess because you're saying that the reason it's okay for us to harm other animals and then consume them is because we are intellectually more dominant, and because we are physically more dominant. But that subscribes to the idea that might makes right, the idea that because we can do something, we're therefore justified to. But do you think that, so that's one question, does might make right, but also does intelligence define worth of life? Or not define worth of life, but should someone be allowed to be harmed by someone else simply because the person harming them is more intelligent than they are?
Man, you're right, bro.
All right.
No, that's true. I agree with that. I don't know. Honestly, the only reason I still eat meat is because it tastes good. And I'm not against veganism. I am totally supporting. I don't even consume red meat anymore. It's just poultry and that kind of stuff. Even I know the factory farming is it's a shit show.
Yeah. Why don't you consume red meat if you don't mind me asking?
It's carcinogenic. It's I heard it's bad for you. Yeah.
Is it bad for the animals as well? The animals who were killed for it? It's a bit of a strange question.
Yeah, they died.
So we talked about earlier. We talked about giving animals a good life. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to come back to that because with factory farming we agree it's wrong. Mm-hmm. So I guess what we acknowledge, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but do we acknowledge that reducing animal suffering is preferable?
Oh, definitely. I feel like most people would agree with that statement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, me too. And most people do seem to, which is obviously good because the opposite would be kind of terrifying if people are like, no, we shouldn't try to reduce suffering. Anyway, so we agree that factory farming is wrong, and we agree it's wrong because of the practices which cause suffering, the confinement, the mutilations and such. So that's bad. So then you and I are at the same point, and then we start coming down this road together, agreeing with each other, and then there's a point where you stop and I keep going. And you stop at the good practices bit, and I keep going to the, no farming of animals at all bit, the veganism bit. So the reason why I don't stop here is for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because if an animal's living a good life, at what point do we then say that they've had enough of a good life? Because we're saying, this is fine because the animals are happy, but at a certain point we have to say enough happiness for you. You can't be any more happy. You've had your fill of happiness. When do we make that decision?
But I could also counter that question with how do you know if the animals are being happy? The animals don't really have a lot of intelligence.
Is that dog over there happy?
I'm sure we don't eat dogs, man. Come on.
Yeah.
It's a bit different. With chickens, they have a lifespan. I don't know how long their lifespan is, but it's not as long as humans, right?
No. So does it have to be for them to deserve moral consideration? Does it have to be a long life?
No, but I feel also they can't express their happiness and they can't express their contentment, and it's a bit different, right? They don't have feelings the same way we do.
How do you know that?
I don't know that specifically, but
we can look at his behavioural aspects and attributes. For the dog, the dog's a very convenient example for me because the dog's right there, right? So that dog's been the dog is beautiful and having a lovely time. All those scratches. So it's a convenient example, but it does illustrate the point, which is that non-human animals are different to us, but there are certain behavioural things such as the way they vocalise things, the way that they act. We can see pain and suffering in the way that animals act, but you can also see contentment and pleasure as well. So we may not recognise it in the same way that we do because they are different to us, but they have the basic components that create emotion. A brain, a nervous system, all of these things that we have and the things that create emotion within us, they also possess. We're kind of saying that it's okay to do these things to animals because we don't have the ability to empathize with them as easily as we do with humans.
I think that's true.
But does that mean that we're justified in harming them? I mean, we recognize they feel pain and we recognize that they can suffer.
Yeah. I don't think you got me in a tight spot here, because I'm not for animal cruelty in any way, right? But I am. Maybe. Hold up.
What about a slaughterhouse? You say you're not for animal cruelty,
Yeah.
but to eat meat, an animal has to go into a slaughterhouse. And even with dairy and eggs, of course they're not physically killed for dairy and eggs, but they do also end up in a slaughterhouse because at a certain point their production declines. So it's not profitable to keep them alive, and then they can be sold for meat. So every animal who we farm is eventually killed in a slaughterhouse. Does that constitute cruelty in your eyes or not?
That definitely constitutes cruelty. I'm going vegan.
So here we were at the top. We disagree with factory farming. We come along and you stopped here. And you stopped here because you felt the animals were given a good life. And even if that is true, they still have to go to a slaughterhouse at a certain point. So then we have to come down a bit further. So if we think that the reduction of animal suffering is morally preferable, then the best way to reduce animal suffering to its fullest extent is to not exploit them in any capacity. Is to not take them to any slaughterhouse or take their life in any way needlessly, which is why veganism becomes the morally preferable choice, because it's the fullest reduction of suffering that we can achieve for the animals who we farm. What do you think about that?
No, that's true. No, that's definitely true. I feel like taking away slaughterhouses and everything is definitely the most moral thing we could do for animals. But also that takes away a huge source of food for the human race. It's like we're not just taking away meat, we're taking away dairy, eggs, anything that's produced by an animal, which also has clothes and everything.
Yeah, it does. That's right.
That's I mean, you're really well versed in this.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're really well spoken, honestly.
I appreciate that. That's very kind. You said about.
You're it's right on.
Well, I appreciate that. You said about the food thing, and you said it takes away a large amount of food.
Yeah.
And I would counter that and say that actually the production of animal products takes away a lot of food. That sounds strange, but the animals who we farm are fed something. And for the majority of them, because they're factory farmed, that means they're fed grains and they're fed soy and corn and stuff like that. And it's not to say that we want to eat what animals eat. We don't want to eat their diets. That wouldn't be so good. But the land that is currently used to produce feed for them is huge. So in the US, for example, just under half of all the landmass of the contiguous US states, so that's all the states except for Alaska and Hawaii, is used to produce animal food. Only 4% of the entire landmass of the US is used to produce food directly for human consumption. So we have this huge problem where 20% of land in the US is used to produce just beef, 20%, and yet it only provides us 3% of our calories. Now, if we repurpose land, we could produce so much more food. And I'm going to give you one more stat. I don't want to be too science heavy with it because it's a bit tedious, but a piece of research was done that said that if we took all of the land that's currently used to grow food for animals, so just the feed for animals, we could grow enough food to feed another 350 million people. So actually, whilst we may think that we're removing food, we're actually creating the opportunity to produce more food than we currently do.
That's crazy.
So it's crazy. And it's just another symptom of this broken system that we currently exist in when it comes to agriculture.
Yeah. I think a lot of it has to do with just the way people are raised and like the culture that people were brought up with. Like eating animals has been around for probably as long as humans have been around.
Well, yeah, more or less,
yeah,
we
more
could
or
say.
less, but yeah, like, but and it's gonna be hard to, like, you can convince me, but it's gonna be hard to convince like 7 billion people, or not. I don't know how many vegans there are, minus that, but
yeah, not as many as we need, that's for sure. Yeah. But the point is, the reason I'm here today is to convince people like yourself and to have conversations with people, because I believe that we have a lot of power, more than we realize. Now, obviously, agriculture is propped up by government subsidies, by legislation and such, which makes it hard for us to think that we can combat it through our consumer choices. But it is a consumer-driven industry, supply and demand and all these different aspects. And so we actually have a lot of power every single day.
Studying that stuff.
Yeah, right. It's true, right? Consumer choice. And ultimately, what we have to decide every single day is, do we want to contribute to a system that increases suffering or reduces suffering? And that's the choice that we have. What would your answer to that be? Reduce or increase?
I would like to reduce suffering for everyone.
And how can we do that when it comes to food?
Go vegan.
So will you?
Yes, maybe slowly.
Slowly. Okay. And
I think it'll be a process. I think it's gonna be hard to go cold turkey.
So let me make it simpler for you. The prospect of going vegan is daunting because we take our current position in life and we say, I've got to change all of this, and then for the rest of my life I'm going to be living this specific way. That's psychologically terrifying. So what we have to do is simplify it right down. And the way to do that is think of foods that you currently enjoy eating. It could be pastas, curries, stir fries, tacos, nachos, burritos, burgers, pies. It could be anything, whatever you enjoy eating. There's a lot of delicious foods there. And you just have to take out the non-vegan components and replace them with something vegan. So for me, spaghetti bolognese was used to be one of my favorite foods. Still is, because I just take out the beef mince and replace it with soy mince or lentils or something else instead. So we're not reinventing the wheel, we're just merely changing little components of it, and that's a way to simplify it down. And then you do it day by day, meal by meal. Instead of going, from this moment on, I'm going to be vegan for the rest of my life, you say, my next meal is going to be a vegan meal. My next meal after that is going to be a vegan meal. And then you do it meal by meal by meal by meal, and eventually you no longer want to eat animal products. But you haven't got there by giving yourself this huge ultimatum. You've got there by just taking it day by day by day until eventually you reach the point where you go, well, why would I want to kill an animal when I don't have to? So just simplify it down, do it day by day, meal by meal, and just replace the components of your favorite dishes with vegan stuff instead. And I think that's the way to go.
Definitely.
What do you think about that?
That's a great way to do it. Actually, I didn't even think about that. Is your cameraman vegan?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, right on, bro.
You wouldn't be hired if he wasn't.
I know, I was gonna say.
But we weren't born vegan. And this is an important point, and maybe we'll end up with this. We weren't born vegan, but we had to ask ourselves a series of questions, and one of them is related to what you said at the beginning, that we enjoy how these foods taste. And one of the questions I asked myself is, what has higher value, taste or life? So let me ask you that question. What has higher value, our taste buds or the life of an animal?
Well, that's like a hard question to answer, you know, like you're asking me to choose whether a life or like something that's temporary, you know, like a taste bud. One way to look at it is like we're only alive for what, like 80 to 100 years, right? And the Earth's been around for much longer than that. So why would you limit yourself to a certain amount of flavors when there's like exponential amount of flavors to try?
Because someone has to suffer and have their life taken from them for some of the flavors we're talking about.
It's not someone.
Are animals not someone's?
No, I feel like they're animals.
But you by yourself said earlier that we're animals as well.
We are, but now we're back to that whole thing.
Well, what are, if an animal isn't a someone, what are they? A something?
You refer to animals as someone? Okay.
Why don't you? Or why wouldn't you?
I don't know. I just never have.
Yeah, it's strange, right?
Yeah.
But this is another thing. The way we talk about animals and the language we use is constantly degrading them. So when we say something, or we call them an it, because it's devaluing their life and their individuality. If we acknowledge that all the animals we farm are someone's who are individuals having their own subjective experiences, it becomes very hard to justify slitting their throats for a meal that lasts 15 minutes when you recognize they're an individual whose entire existence, think about this, their entire existence has been taken from them for 15 minutes of sensory pleasure on our end. That is potentially one of the most arbitrary things that we could possibly use to justify taking someone's entire life from them. You know, the process of what they're forced to endure, and then having their throat cut for something that we eat and then forget about almost instantly. And that's why these flavors aren't more important, because we're talking about someone's existence, and that is a someone because they're an individual, a sentient conscious being with feelings who obviously is very different to us, but in the same way that our life is valuable to us, their life is valuable to them. They fight for their lives. You know, they don't willfully walk into a slaughterhouse. They struggle and fight to get out. They're fearful and scared, and we force them into these environments so that we can put them between two slices of bread and call it a sandwich. I don't know. I'm getting emotional, but I think that's a travesty. I really do. What do you think?
Yeah, you got me, bro. No, that's true. I can't even argue with that.
Yeah, I know.
No, you can't. It's hard to argue with that. I don't normally
get emotional, but I just think that it's such a severe thing that we do, and it's for something that's so irrelevant in the grand scheme of what we can achieve as humans. We want a better world, a world without suffering. Well, one of the best ways we can reduce suffering is by changing what's on our plates, you know, and that can be a good stepping stone to addressing other issues as well, of course. It doesn't end there, but it's a great way to start.
Definitely.
All right.
Yeah, I think so too.
Cool. All right.
Holy shit.
Oh shit.
That was great.
Thank you, my friends. Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, thank you. It's very kind. He is the man. If you're interested over there, are they still there? Oh yeah.
Yeah, we have flyers. We have a campaign against Tyson food.
And they're a vegan organization, so they can help you.
Against Tyson too.
Okay, but actually, just a brief thing to mention. Okay, you say you're against factory farming. This is the last point. But what you have to recognize is that over 99.9% of the animal products in this country come from factory farms. So when we buy these products, that's according to the USDA. When we buy these products, we're directly supporting an industry that we know to be terrible. So it's just something to think about as well.
99.9%.
According to the USDA, yeah. It's a huge number.
That's crazy. Is it like that worldwide?
More or less. Well, in developed nations. And in nations that are developing, who are becoming more economically sufficient, and their agriculture is getting that case there. You know, the number of animals that we're killing is increasing, not decreasing, unfortunately. But hopefully we can curb that.
Are the number of animals produced increasing as well?
We're at 80 billion land animals, and we kill somewhere between 0.8 and 2.3 trillion marine animals. Yeah, that's fish. So it's a staggering number. Shocking.
I didn't even think about fish. Oh my god.
I know. Yeah. They count as well.
I apologize for all meat eaters and all non-vegans.
We get there. I the same ones. So that's cool. Man. All right, take it easy.
Let me get you guys on socials.
Yeah, for sure.